Hi guys, today I'll be sharing with y'all a rapid game that I played against a FIDE master. So without further ado, I'll jump into the game proper. Okay, so the opening was quite normal, e4, e5. He decided to go knight c3, which is a bit unconventional, or at least, to say the least, not what I was comfortable with, because usually I'm more comfortable with knight f3, but so I decided to respond with knight f6. He played bishop c4, just developing naturally, and I responded with bishop c5, so I can develop my pieces quickly also, and my plan is to castle the next move. So he played d3 to open up the diagonal for the dark square bishop, and just proceeded with my plan of castling kingside. So over here he actually played a very surprising move, which is f4. The main drawback of this move is that he will have some trouble castling on the king side, because now the bishop will be eyeing the g1 square, so it will not be possible for him to castle king side unless he obstructs the bishop with a move like bishop e3 in the future, and of course he has to protect that bishop, if not it will be hanging. And so I thought that it was a very strange move, and I have not really encountered such moves in this position. So I decided to reinforce my e5 pawn with the move d6, and he played knight f3, preparing to maybe castle kingside after something like queen e2 and bishop e3. And I decided to play c6. The idea of this move is to engineer a potential d5 in the future, but also maybe I can have some ideas like b5, a5, a6 in the future to really expand on the queen side and clamp down on the position. And I think my opponent over here was also very wary of potential b5 that will come with tempo on his light square bishop, so he decided to play a prophylactic move by just retreating the bishop back to b3. I continued to just develop very naturally with knight d7. And over here, yeah, according to the engine, he made a mistake by playing f5 instead of taking on e5. But personally, from like my perspective, it was still quite scary, because he's expanding on the king side, and he could have ideas of g4, g5 in the future and start a monstrous king side attack, which will be quite hard to defend. Yeah, so I still had to play it very carefully and just look for opportunities to have counterplay. So I decided to expand on the queen side with a5. He replied with a4 to gain space, and just mainly to prevent me from playing a4 also. Over here, yeah, I decided to play bishop b4 with the idea of pinning the knight to the king, but in hindsight, it wasn't probably that good of a move, because it allows him to just castle, and honestly, doubling the pawn on c3 might do more harm than good for me, because it can allow a potential d4 in the future to strike at the center and just target that e5 pawn. So I think, yeah, it wasn't that good of a move by me. And of course, since my bishop is now off the diagonal, he can just go ahead and castle, and I think the position is very nice for my opponent. So over here I decided to play knight c5, just trying to get my pieces to more active squares, and of course one of the ideas would be to target the bishop on b3. And because often in this kind of structures, the light square bishop is very powerful, and it just x-rays the king, and there could be many potential tactics, in the future. If I play g6, he can sack a piece on g6 and rely on the pin to, you know, just break through on the king side and just attack me. So that is one of the ideas behind knight c5, and it's just to maybe also clear the d7 square for my knight square bishop to develop, so I can connect my rooks. So he just decided to play bishop g5. The idea is just to pin the knight to my queen. Yep. And I responded with h6, trying to kick away the bishop. Yeah. And he decided to maintain the pin on the knight by just retreating a bishop back to h4. And I think over here, I did finally decide to take on b3 to kind of undermine his pawn structure and just to create double pawns on the b files, which could be potential weaknesses in the endgame, and just also to remove the light square bishop like I mentioned before. So he took back. I just played rook e8 to kind of develop my rook to maybe protect the e5 pawn, and in the future I can have ideas such as d5, d4, or just to attack the center while ensuring that my e5 pawn is protected. And he decided to play king h1. I guess his idea is just to sidestep any potential checks along the diagonal to ensure that there won't be any tactics that arise, and yeah, it's just a prophylactic move to prevent any tactics arising from a check along the diagonal. So over here I finally decided to break in the center with the move d5 to strike at the center and to basically create tension and to also gain space so that my pieces have more squares to go to. And here he decided to play queen e2, not really sure what the idea is, or maybe just to connect the rooks. And yeah. And I responded with queen d6. The idea behind this move is just to sidestep the pin from the bishop, because now my queen is no longer on d8 and my knight is now free to move. It can go to maybe h5 and followed by f4 in the future, or I can go to, you know, g4 to create some kind of play on the king side. So I thought it was a reasonable move, but the engine disagrees and is suggesting b6. So my opponent replied with rook a to d1, maybe preparing certain tactics along the d file in the event that I do decide to take on e4. Yeah, so definitely I would think that is quite a normal looking move, and yep, it also brings one of his last pieces into the game. So I think that it is a reasonable move, but the engine disagrees. So over here I decided to play b6 with the idea of playing bishop a6 to kind of x-ray the queen and the rook along that diagonal, because the way that I look at it is that my bishop doesn't have any good squares to go to. Like if it's on d7, it will be a bit too passive. So I thought that the best square to place my light square bishop will be on a6 to x-ray the queen and the rook and to prepare certain tactics in the future. And he replied with knight d2. Again, not too sure what the idea behind that move is. Maybe just to reinforce the e4 pawn, but other than that, I'm not too sure what the idea behind that move is. Or maybe a potential rook leave rook f3 to g3 and create some kind of attack against my king. Yeah, maybe that could be his idea. So I just continue with my plan to bishop a6 to x-ray the queen and the rook. Yep, so he did bring his rook up to f3 with the idea of bringing it to g3 next, like I mentioned. So over here I took quite a long think on this move. I eventually decided to play d4. Reason being that it is just to kind of gain space in the center, and I thought that the knight will have not many good squares to go to, and it will have to probably retreat back to b1 or to a2, which are not really ideal squares for the knight. So I thought it was a fair move, but the engine is suggesting knight h5 with the idea of going to f4, which I definitely did see, but I thought that my opponent could just simply play something like bishop g3, and the idea of going to f4 will not be that good because he can just trade off my knight. So yep, I'm not too sure about how good a plan of moving my knight to f4 would be, so I just decided to proceed with d4. And yes, he decided to retreat his knight back to b1, and the knight on b1 is very passive because it's just blocked by the other knight on d2, and it doesn't have a lot of squares that it can go to from b1. So over here, I think I was not very sure what to play also, so I just decided to play b5 to maybe trade some pawns and open up the b file so that I can attack down the b file in the future. But I think I do agree with the engine that it is definitely a mistake, and there are better moves in the position. Over here, my opponent decided to play knight f1. Not really sure what the idea is. Maybe he is planning to transfer his knight to h5 to apply some pressure on the king side. Yeah. So I finally decided to go with the plan of knight h5. And over here, he actually blundered with f6. But I was not too sure that it was a blunder when I first saw it. I just thought that it didn't feel right, because when I saw f6, the first move that came to mind was definitely to play g5 to kick away the bishop, and then I will have like a Maroczy bind over the f4 square where I can just put my knight there, and it will be a beautiful outpost for my knight there. And since the knight is now blocking the rook from protecting the pawn, I can eventually win the f6 pawn also. So I thought it was definitely a mistake, but the engine evaluates it as a blunder. So yes, I do go ahead with my plan of knight f4, attacking the queen, so this move comes with tempo, and he decides to retreat his queen to c2. Yeah, and I do go ahead with the idea as I mentioned, which is playing g5 with tempo again to kick the dark square bishop, and decides to retreat his bishop back to f2. And I think I took a long turn on this turn also, because I was also not very sure how to continue. I knew that I had the advantage, but I need to come up with a concrete plan to kind of break through his defenses and to consolidate my advantage. So in this position, I was thinking, what pieces can I improve in my position? And I realized that my light square bishop has now done its job along the diagonal, x-raying the queen and the rook before. So I decided it was time to transfer it to the other diagonal to maybe apply some pressure and to basically trap his rook with the move bishop g4 next. And over here, for some reason, he decided to ignore the threat and just simply played knight g3, maybe with the idea of playing knight f5 next to create some kind of play against my king. But I don't see how it is exactly a very dangerous move, so I just went ahead with my idea of bishop g4, and I'm now going to win at exchange. So I thought that the position was definitely winning for me, and I just needed to find a way to consolidate my advantage. So he followed through with his plan of knight f5, and I just took the pawn on f6, protecting h6, so that there is no kind of play against my king and any potential tactics against my king. And he just retreated his rook to the g1 square, and over here I'll just happily take on f3. Although the engine did suggest taking on f5, and I did actually consider taking on f5, because the knight on f5 would be very strong, and it's very hard to remove without light square bishop, and I guess I could trap the rook on f3 in the future with moves like g4, but I wasn't feeling that I needed to take the risk, and I just decided to take the exchange and play on from there. So he took back, and I think a very nice move over here, king h7, just to sidestep any potential h4, utilizing the pin on the pawn in front of my king to create any sort of play against my king. So I just made a prophylactic move by moving my king to h7, and just to add extra protection to the h6 pawn as well. So he decided to play his queen to d1, maybe to transfer his queen to the king side and create some kind of attack or counterplay against my king. And over here, I think my plan is very simple. So I played knight e6 with the intention of playing knight g7 next. Because like I mentioned, the knight on f5 is really very strong, and it really targets a lot of key squares like g7, h6. So it is a very powerful knight, and I need to find a way to remove it. So while I could have played knight h3 to trade off the dark square bishop, but I ultimately decided against it, and I thought it would be a better plan to remove the knight on f5 to really restrict all sorts of counterplay that he has against my king. And yep, so he decided to continue with queen f1, and over here I played knight g7, and after some thought my opponent here decided to resign, because like I mentioned, once the knight on f5 is being traded, he really has not much counterplay that he can come up with against my king. And the knight on b1 is still very miserable and has no play at all because of my dark square bishop, which is just keeping it locked in on the b1 square. So I think overall it was a pretty good game by me, showing some good understanding and really how to restrict as much counterplay as possible by my opponent. And I think he did play quite a good game, but some of his moves I couldn't really understand, and I think that's ultimately why he lost the game, because he did not have a concrete plan, and he just played very reactionary to the moves that I came up with. So this is the game that I played against Affiliate Master, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.